There we go. So, hello, my name is Theo Blackmore from Disability Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly, and today I'm talking to
Joyce Kallevik, and I'm the director of WISH, a user-led women's mental health organisation. In fact, the only one in a national organisation in covering England and Wales.
And so that's interesting. So you're a national organisation.
Yeah. Although some of our services are localised, where the remit is as a national organisation. Well, especially in relation to campaigning and influence. Yeah.
And so where are you based? Where's your premises?
We're based in Bethnal Green in East London. And we've got 3 offices there. We've got our, the hub of Driving Wish Forward office. We've got a community link office, and we've got counselling rooms as well. We provide trauma-informed counselling for women.
So just the name of your organisation, WISH, did it used to be an acronym, or is it always just been WISH?
No, it did used to be an acronym. WISH started in 1987, and it was set up by Prue Stevenson, Terry Simpson, and Kimberly Andrews. So Kim was working in the education department at Holloway. Prue was working in the education department, and then they got together with former patients at Rampton Hospital, High Secure Hospital. There was a lot of concern because of the mental health of women in Holloway, and then the link with Rampton. So, the group formed WISH, Women in Secure Hospitals, which is now obviously that's not representative of the work we do, but we still do work in forensic units in secure hospitals.
And so I saw, because I had a quick look at your website, and I saw that you work particularly with women who have experienced the prison system. So I saw that. So when you say Holloway, are you referring there to the Holloway?
Yes, Holloway prison. It's now closed, and there's a big movement to make it a community space for women. That's been an ongoing challenge, I think.
Oh wow, I didn't know Holloway closed.
Yeah.
When did it close?
Oh gosh, 6 years ago maybe. Yeah. But I mean, mental health is not properly addressed in prison at all, and it's only those with serious mental illness who grab the attention. I think it's 78% of women in prison have experienced mental health issues. So it's big.
Yeah, it's a massive issue, isn't it? I mean, mental health services have just been decimated across the country, and social services, they have 4 criteria of groups of people they work with: people over 65, people with physical impairments, people with learning difficulties, and people with mental health issues. And the mental health issues have just been so massively underfunded. I think that lots of social services departments, in fact, don't do any funding at all anymore, or any services.
No, it's very hard to get to access social services. And of course, it was difficult before COVID, but since COVID, well, all health and social services are in tatters. And, in a way, we and other charities are providing the services that should be provided through social services. And now, of course, because of the cost of living crisis impacting severely on the women, well, everyone who's, sort of low income groups and disabled people, a whole range of people, the cost of living crisis has meant that, women are at their absolute wit's end about how to survive. We're just about to do a blog actually on the cost of living crisis, and I've just been reading it, and a child of one of the women said that she's afraid they're going to be homeless. Housing, finances, food, all those basic things that shouldn't really be, should be provided in a wealthy society, you know, just not available to a large portion of people. And there's a report just come out by I think it's called No Child Left Behind, and that states that a third of children are living in poverty in this country.
You know,
Crazy.
and women are seen as the primary caregivers, obviously. And so when, you know, if you watch on the news, then it's very often a woman who's being interviewed with a small child, and they go to food banks. You know, something, I think 60% of people who use food banks, the Trussell Trust said, or maybe even more, are disabled people. And that obviously includes women with mental health issues. So there's just a huge number of women taking on an incredible amount of responsibility.
Yeah, and you know, without wanting to generalize, it's usually women who pick up the pieces of what's happening, you know, economically in the house with children. So it's that in itself is a huge pressure which impacts on mental health. Yeah, and what we found actually, and we're having a meeting about this, it's all happening tomorrow, we're having a meeting about it. Sorry. We're having a meeting about it, is that the women are self-referral and referral rates are absolutely going through the sky. I mean, Wish has got a history of working with women in the prison system, criminal, the secure hospital system, women with severe mental illness and disadvantage who've experienced a whole range of trauma, childhood abuse, and as part of their coping mechanism have turned to drugs and alcohol, they self-injure. So those women, who actually need the most support and are often turned away by services because they're seen as too challenging. But now we're getting referrals and self-referrals from everyone and anyone, I'm in desperate need of support, and we've got to, it's very hard to turn people away, but at the same time, we're absolutely over capacity and under resourced. And we're just looking at trying to develop a strategy for, enabling some support without becoming completely overwhelmed. And of course, we've got to think of our staff who absolutely work, above and beyond, and we've got to think about their mental health and their well-being as well. So yeah, it's a challenge.
Yeah, it must be very difficult to, dealing with the people that you're dealing with and the workload you're dealing with, to leave work at work and go home in the evening without it just taking over your life in many ways. You've got to be really careful, I guess, as a team.
Yeah, we have. I mean, we're actually just realizing now, I mean, we put mechanisms in place during COVID because staff were working at home. There were, it was dire for women who, many said, lockdown felt like being locked up again. So it was very re-traumatizing. They were socially isolated, anxiety and depression. They didn't know what was happening. None of us knew what was happening with COVID and the lockdown rules changing. So we put a strategy in place to ensure that we could support our staff regular, long weekly meetings with, sort of guidance and support. And I think we're just realizing now we have to do that again because, capacity is completely, too much, limited, and the work is just too much.
I've been having these conversations with disabled people's organizations across the country now for only a short while, relatively, but the disabled people's organizations across the country are all experiencing the same sorts of issues, which is undercapacity, underfunding, huge demand on services, especially since COVID, but also during COVID. So did you see a spike in your services during COVID? That bring more people to your doors, as it were?
I think to a certain extent, but the people we were already working with needed more support as well. And I think, because of COVID and, IT issues, access to that, it did bring a bit of a surge, but also it meant that the women we were working with, we had to work with more intensively. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm very sorry. I was just writing things down because there's things I want to remember to ask about. But so it's, during COVID, things were very difficult. So we noticed that lots of disabled people's organisations changed the way that they worked. So instead of being very reactive and waiting for phone calls to come in, they became very proactive and started phoning out to make sure that the people that they knew and the people they were in contact with had everything they needed, were able to access food, could access the medicine they needed, but also just had human contact, because a lot of people found themselves on their own in their homes without any visitors or anything happening, or just nobody coming into their lives.
Yeah, that's exactly what we did. And what we also did, I think we sent 2 or 3 parcels to women of lovely things like tea, or sort of essences, and little amethyst crystals, things that were like, there to bring some joy, really. And honestly, the response we got was absolutely incredible. For what must have cost a tenner probably per person. It was like, sort of really heartwarming to see how so little can bring so much joy to women, and how much they appreciate them. The notes we got were incredible, yeah.
And so as an organisation, your organisation is entirely staffed and run by women.
Yeah.
And you say that you're entirely a user-led service. So I guess that a number of those women that have themselves been through the prison system or the mental health system and have personal experience of that. So
Yeah.
could bring that to their relationships with the people who come to you.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that peer. Well, our services are built on relational security and trust, and that's something that women really value. But also, there's a recognition. It's unspoken, isn't it? If you know where people are coming from, then there's a whole different response to how you work with them and how you support them. I've been an advocate, an IMHA, in a forensic unit, and actually it was the best. Although forensic units are not the best at all, and not in any way, I would say, a good way for women to heal or to, recover, or come to terms or whatever with what's happened to them. But
so what is a forensic unit?
it's it's a secure unit. It's the unit where people are detained under the Mental Health Act, and there's often a criminal element to their detention, which can be minor or major. But when I used to go on the wards, because we were a proactive service, we didn't wait for people to ring up and say, "Well, I've got an issue." We'd go on the ward every week. We'd build relationships. We'd play games. We'd do things that they related to, so they felt confident in our ability to support them and trusted us, because a lot of women that we work with, a very large proportion, have experienced childhood sexual abuse, and therefore, developing trust in relationships is not necessarily something that comes easy. So yeah, and it was the best part of my job, because you could just, even though, I'm a back of house sort of person, really, as director, you're there at the strategy level and trying to make things happen, make sure the business strategy is being followed, fundraising, but being on the front line and seeing, firsthand the impact that Wish could bring to women's lives was, absolutely amazing, and definitely the best part of my job ever at Wish.
And so as an organisation then, so what do you do? Do you go visiting people in secure units, I guess, in London and around the country, or just?
Well, we have we've got three services. One is we've been working in prisons, and that is just around supporting women. The other is we've got, and that's not paid. Everything comes under the, the MOJ funding umbrellas, which really don't fit our sort of service at all. It's one bam.
The MOJ, the Ministry of Justice.
Yeah, they've got various funding strands, partnerships, and really they're not really the sort of thing that we do. But we've got some advocacy contracts in women's units. We used to have a lot, but of course we're a bit more expensive because we have a different approach. And also, obviously, women are the minority in both secure hospitals and in prison. So we want, it's very competitive, and the hospitals want one organisation to deliver both services to men and women. So we find, that's quite difficult to compete, but we're just reviewing our advocacy service. We've reviewed all our services actually since COVID, the counselling, community link. So we're just about to start to review advocacy to look at our unique selling points, to try and assess impact so that we can market the service to a wider range of hospitals.
It's interesting. So one thing you said, lots of things you said, but one of the things you said was that women are the minority in prisons and in mental health institutions, but women are the majority of the population.
Mm-mm.
So that's kind of, is that what's going on there then? How come?
Well, I suppose, looking at the statistics for women and, criminal offences, the majority of women commit very minor offence. They can be put in prison for walking close to the road and endangering themselves and others. It's like absolutely, or, shoplifting to buy drugs for them or whoever is supporting them often. And many of the crimes women commit are on behalf of the men they're with. And so, yeah, and women commit less crime basically. And also the travesty is that the system is made by men for men, and so women's needs are not as profiled. Although there was a women's mental health strategy at the beginning of the 20s, 2002 into the mainstream, it was a lot of rhetoric really. There was no funding behind it. And some things did change, like mixed wards, which obviously is a very important one, but there are still mixed wards. Women want relational security and environmental security, not physical security, which is, what is more applicable to men. They get second place. They did get second place in, education and workshops. It would always be, men's needs would be met first. Yeah.
Amazing. When I was talking to somebody, I remember, so the project that I've recently completed with Disability Cornwall was funded from the National Lottery, and we were evaluated by an organisation called Epic Consultants, and they have experience in the mental health and the prison system.
Oh, really?
The judicial system, yeah. And I got quite close to one of the women who was working there, and she was just describing some of the stuff that she goes through on a daily basis, really. And I was very interested to talk to her about some of the themes, because some of the themes kind of overlap with disability, although she's not a disabled person herself. So, a lot of the stigma that as a person who's been in prison or in the mental health system, a lot of stigma that you carry with you and that is directed towards you from the broader society is something that is really hard to deal with and get over and get through. And that must be something that you deal with a lot with people who are out in the community. But like you say, in COVID, people have basically felt like they were locked up again. And the social stigma of coming through that and being judged by other people around you.
Well, the labelling process in itself around mental health is severely impacts on people. But I mean, and yeah, the women we work with are viewed as mad bad women, basically. And it's very difficult to get a lot of funders and not at all sensitive to our cause or and yeah, women, they're in denial. They want to be in denial. They want it to be shut away. They see it as a weakness. Whereas actually, if you look at the women that we work with and the experiences they've had and how they've come through and dealt with it, they're really strong women if given the opportunity, the best type of support. They'd definitely be able to work through what's happened to them. And what we want is that women are not just treading water. We want them to swim, and we want them to have goals and aspirations. So our Community Link project, which we've just reviewed, is about enabling women to have the intensive emotional and practical support they need when leaving prison or hospital. We've got a trauma-informed counselling service, because often women, are re-triggered through their lives by not dealing or not being able to work through what's happened to them in earlier years. And then also we're just piloting a coaching service. And so we're looking at how, enabling women to have aspirations, goals, to see themselves as, having a life, a good life, rather than just like surviving.
Yeah, so I mean, all that's kind of the stigma stuff, but there's a whole load of other stuff as well around disclosure. So at what point in a relationship, for example, or in a, if you're being employed, do you feel safe enough to be able to disclose your past in, you know what I mean, the kind of the systems that you've been through in many ways? That must be something that you work with, because for a lot of disabled people, for the job application form, you have to tick a box to describe if you're a disabled person or not. And a lot of disabled people don't tick that box.
No.
They say that, what will automatically happen is you'll just be put on the no pile.
Yeah.
And they leave it.
Especially mental health.
They wait till they get to the job interview when they then might disclose it at that point.
Yeah. No, it is difficult, and it's hidden away, isn't it? It's a stigma. People don't talk about it. It's and I mean, of course, the other thing is that women who've experienced abuse in childhood and other disadvantage will often be drawn to abusive relationships, and that's the whole area of domestic violence, which, I mean, we're not a specialist organisation in that, but obviously many of the women we work with have and do experience domestic violence. You're going to edit this, aren't you?
Well, we don't necessarily cut things out unless, we won't talk about names or anything. We won't disclose anything like that.
Okay.
But it will go out basically like this.
Okay.
And so in terms of the kinds of places that you work with, how many are there? I don't know how many prisons there are full stop in the UK, and how many women's prisons there are.
I think there's 12 women's prisons, and we did work at Bronzefield. We had a contract to work there, but then that was replaced, and we're now just starting the process of working three prisons in the southeast: Downview, Bronzefield, and Sens. So that's a process that we're trying to pick up from that. But we still have links with prisons and women in prison in different prisons.
So you have women, and you say there are a lot of the other prisons are mixed prisons still.
No, they're all they're all prison. They're separate prisons, male and female estate prisons. Yeah.
Right.
But the hospitals are cater for men and women. They just have separate units. So often in a hospital, you know, that there'll be a very small contingent of women.
And so the services that you provide community services, and you provide, I guess, one-to-one advocacy services. I think I saw on the website. What other services do you provide? Why would somebody get in contact with you? What would they contact you for?
Well, the services we provide in the community are primarily in London and South East, and then so the hospitals, we're working with 3 hospitals in the Midlands and the North at the moment. We also provide training for professionals around gender and mental health. We provide that to multidisciplinary teams in forensic unit, and also we're getting a lot of requests now from employers to provide some, you know, generic training information from for women in employment in their organisation. So that's something that we're looking at as well. And we do consultancy as well. We're doing some consultancy for Inclusion London at the moment around one of their campaigning projects. And also, you know, obviously we were born as a campaigning organisation, and we were really successful. And in fact, it was from 2 research reports which we produced in 2000 and in 1999. One is defining gender issues, redefining women's services, and the other is Good Girls Surviving the Secure System. And that was really the first time that gender was, you know, put on the agenda as a differentiating factor in mental health, and, you know, how the causes of women's mental health and, you know, the different support and treatments that might be appropriate are different than for men. So yeah, so we were pioneering, but like a lot of small organisations, you can never take advantage of it really, because you haven't got the money, or, you know, you haven't got the capacity, the core capacity. So we have, you know, we have been very active in campaigning, and we want to get back to that now. And we've just got funding through the Trust for London Disability Justice Fund, which is absolutely fantastic news. And that's around, part of it's around building diversity and inclusion into Wish, you know, making that a more robust aspect of Wish. It's about reviewing our membership offer and making sure our members are for what we do. But also there's we want to carry out research with women who are now in the community but who have been in forensic units, to look at what their experiences were, how things can change, you know, what moving into the community meant and support that they had there, and to develop a campaign around that. I mean, ideally, our aim, actually, it's a 3-year project, is to be able to go directly into secure units and talk with women about their experiences, but it's very hard. It's getting, you know, gaining access, it's very restricted, gaining access to those environments.
And so do you work with, so you mentioned Inclusion London, do you work with other disabled people's organisations like elsewhere in the country?
Yeah, we have had partnerships with different people. We've worked with Ensign, we work People First, we've got close relationships with a number of organisations, yeah. Yeah, but obviously, I mean, it's great working in partnership, but that adds an element of capacity need to your organisation as well. And we're literally, you know, about 6 full-time equivalent staff, at which we're absolutely great value for money. But of course, charitable trust funders don't see it like that, you know, jumping through all the hoops. It's like, there's absolutely no understanding that one person is responsible for every department. Where in an organisation, a bigger organisation, you'd have cast of thousands. So there's no understanding of that. But I've got to say that the interview and the process with Trust for London was absolutely amazing. Obviously they completely get it, and sort of, so that that's reassuring. But we found it difficult in COVID. The emergency grants, we were the target group, mental health, yeah, we got quite a bit of funding, but it was all had to be spent by the end of the year. So that's ridiculous. And then after COVID, an absolute drought of funding. And what we've done is we've built up our donor fundraising capacity, and that has been incredible support. Of course, now with the cost of living crisis, that is going to be, not as abundant as it has been.
Yeah, and a lot of people you work with, everything just must all just tie in. So I mean, not only have we come through, but first of all, we had all the austerity, and then we come out of that and we go into COVID, and we come out of that and we go into the cost of living crisis. And if you're already dealing with mental health issues and you come out of a system, and for the first time you might find yourself living in the community, then it's going to be really tough.
Yeah, it is tough. And it's not, I mean, what in a way, what COVID did was help build communities to a certain extent, which, I mean, for me personally, community is the basis. Good, supportive community and collective action and support is the basis of survival, basically. If you've got that in place, then it's very solid. You might have friends and family, but that changes, and people go through different challenges in those relationships. But for me, community is a solid basis on which to build. So I think that did happen in COVID, yeah. But it's hard. It's hard to make contact, and especially if you're, sort of, a lot of people are agoraphobic or anxious, so they're not going to reach out to try and make friends and go places. It's like, it's very challenging for people.
And a lot of people, I guess, a lot of people that you need to reach are the people who are least likely to try to reach you.
Yeah, and that's why we try to make links in the prison so that women can, sort of come to our service at that point.
And
But actually, we've got a great comms manager, and which is great, but it means that our name is going far and wide, and we're getting, as I said, a lot of referrals from women, all over the country, and other bigger organisations referring women to us. So I think organisations are all in the same boat, aren't they, really?
Yeah. But I saw on your website as well that you have an online community. So people who perhaps can't come to you, can they contact you online? Have you got some sort of online forum or something? Or
no, we haven't. We've got our a sort of support community, not online as such, but via email and MailChimp, but many of our members are in prison or hospital, so we don't have access to that. So we also have paper versions of things, and we're just about to do a consultation with members now about how we can what we should do in reviewing the membership offer. And consultation is really important. Just before, it's all before or after COVID, isn't it now? So just before COVID, we'd done a consultation with our members about the areas they wanted us to take forward. And the first was gender trauma-informed counselling. And that has been hugely successful. We're collecting evidence of impact so that we can campaign for this service to be available to women, because there's nothing really when I think of all the people I know who have counselling, I'm not saying, and everybody's life's a challenge, but if anybody would benefit, many of the women we work with would benefit, but not like 6 weeks or a digital course or something. It's like we do up to a year's free counselling for women, and in Tower Hamlets, and we've got a link with Social Prescriber at one of the local GPs at the mission practice, so that's worked very well. So we want to collect that evidence and maybe develop a campaign to demonstrate the difference it can make to women to, demand on services and other aspects. And then the other thing that women wanted to take forward for us to campaign on was in hospitals and prisons, if women are on observation, then they have to be observed. And often it's a man walking up and down the corridor at night, opening the little latch, looking in. And that is the most, obviously a really traumatic experience for women. And it's absolutely not rocket science that it would be, is it really?
Yeah.
Given women's experience. But yeah. So we need to review, looking at taking that forward.
And some of the organisations that I've spoken to who offer very specialist service, like the kinds of services that you offer, they also offer training to disabled people's organisations, so that organisations around the country can work with people who come through their doors. Do you offer that kind of training as well?
No, we don't, but we are developing some training, and I think I'm going to put that on my list. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, it just occurs to me that if somebody walks through the door down here in Disability Cornwall, for example, then we might not automatically refer them to you, but it might be something that we could work with that person and help them in a way that we were trained to do if there were such training, sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great idea. Yeah, I mean, I think we're all just focused on our own survival, really, aren't we? But I think that's a great, that would be a great offer.
It's been very nice talking to you. What have we not talked about that you should have, that I should have talked about, or you should have talked about? Anything else that you think we've missed out?
I don't think there is really. I suppose the one thing that also brings us joy is that when women, we worked with women, they're in a better place. They always want to give back to us, and that's such an empowering, thing. It's like people who are giving have it, and people who are receiving, are on the other end, and there's not that status. But obviously, without a receiver, you can't have a giver. And women, they volunteer for us, they fundraise, they support us in a number of ways, and that is absolutely, a great accolade that they come back into the organisation and they're part of Wish in a different way, and that's great.
It's something I'm very interested in. It's that idea that for a lot of disabled people, including people with mental health issues, a lot of the time they have very few opportunities to give back, that sort of reciprocality. So it's always like people get given benefits, or they get given
exactly.
this.
Yeah.
There's very little chance for them to give something back, to feel part of a community. And I think that giving back is where you started the whole conversation about community about 3/4 of an hour ago. I think that sense of community really does get stronger if there is a sense of reciprocality within it, so that people are giving as well as taking.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that there's a great sense of equality within the organisation, staff, volunteers, and the women. I mean, women used to drop into the office and we'd have community space, and we haven't got that back yet fully. But if you come into our office, our community link office, is just like coming into somebody's living room. It's great. There's a whole different energy there, and women really value that. Yeah.
Well, brilliant. Thank you very much for your time. It's been very nice talking to you. I can see the sun's coming through your windows like it is through mine. So I hope you have a very happy and lovely summer.
Thank you very much, Theo. Thank you. It's been lovely talking. I don't do this. I'm not a front of house person, so I don't do this sort of thing very often, but I do love talking about Wish. So thank you.
Great. Thanks for your insights.